In today's episode of the Pathmark Presents podcast, I got an interesting guest here with me today. I'm with Ross Simmons, and he's hailing over from the folks over at Flimp. And at Flimp, they're all about basically educating and engaging your employees, and that's a very interesting, very interesting area. A product that definitely gets your employees to, engage at a much deeper level. Ross is the director of inbound marketing. So today we want to really deep dive into how he's thinking about growth for Flimp. So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, yeah. So Ross, maybe give us a quick overview in your own words. What is Flimp all about?
Yeah, so Flimp creates content-enabled and technology-enabled HR communications. The entire goal is to help your employees use, choose, and love their benefits, to improve your retention, to improve your hiring, to improve your engagement. That's probably the biggest core thing, and especially one area we focus on is around open enrollment in particular, that key, 1 month period where all the employees are choosing their benefits and going through kind of a cram period, trying to understand their benefits and what's going to help them in the next year.
Okay, awesome. Very cool. Now, quite naturally, obviously, HR managers seem to be like the great fit or a great use case. Like, who else do you see picking up on the solution? Is it even employees that haven't seen in other organizations and bringing it up and bubble it up, or who's the champion typically within those organizations?
Yeah, so our two biggest audiences are HR teams directly, as well as HR brokers and consultants. They have their own sort of suite of solutions they often bring to a client. We're often in that list because of how versatile we can be.
Makes sense. Now, what would you say, how do these folks learn about Flimp? Like, how would you describe their journey of learning about you guys, getting started, or in other words, what are the client acquisition channels you guys leverage?
For sure. So we have a lot of repeat business and broker referrals. Essentially, that's one side of the business. The other side of the business is primarily organic. We don't do a ton of outbound. We do some outbound emailing. We do no outbound calling. We do a little bit of paid, but most of it's organic. Especially since I've taken over as director of inbound marketing back in December 2020. So like most of our growth is on the organic side specifically. In terms of like the actual user path, we do get quite a few people on the homepage, obviously searching for employee videos or various search terms, but what's taken over now is some of our content efforts we put together in 2021 have now taken over. So the number one page on our site is actually a blog article now. It actually outperforms the homepage overall. And that blog article is 3 email templates for open enrollment to drive better engagement. And that kind of highlights one thing that we focus on the Flimp side is actionable content. So like from my understanding, there's like three kind of core motivators for users who are doing searches. They want to learn something, they want to be inspired, or they want to do something. So they're trying to look for something educational. They want to understand their problem or understand possible solutions for that problem. They want to be inspired. They want to see how other people are doing it or good examples of something that they're trying to do. So for example, if they're grading employee video for benefits, they maybe want to see examples of employee videos. And the last piece there is they were doing something, right? So they're in the process, they're thinking about doing something. They're looking for assistance, whether that be a template, a step-by-step guide, a checklist, something like that, right? So what we found is that when I looked at our industry, our competitors and what they were doing, they weren't really doing the do something side of that. They weren't really providing that actionable content because it's very hard. It's also very scary to do that because a lot of companies from the agency side fear that if they enable their customers to do it for themselves, then they won't buy it from them. But I don't believe in that. So we focus on that, and that's been a huge driver of our growth.
That makes a whole lot of sense. Actually, I want to get back to that moment. You mentioned you joined in December 2020, and you building up inbound. Like, what is maybe the 1 or 2 advices you would give for a marketer that goes into an organization and has to really build up that inbound muscle? Like, what's sort of the key levers that you were pulling?
Yeah, for sure. So like probably the biggest thing that's tricky is you have to like understand like providing value in content. Like if you're going to create a good content program, you can't too fluffy content. It has to be like really value driven. That starts with understanding your audience, their buyer persona, or the questions they're asking in the marketplace, and giving them exactly that value. Beyond that, organizationally, I have a writer that I work with for a long time, about going on 8-9 years now, and we have a very strong relationship. And I know that I can give him a simple title, simple description. He knows my company. He can take that and run with that and go from there. So we have kind of an engine that can push things over. It makes my job a lot easier from a management standpoint, so I can do other things in the organization.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Now let's talk inbound a little bit. Like, how do you think about the role of the website in the buyer's journey? Like, what main job does the website take on? If we take the jobs to be done framework, like what's the main job that the website takes, you'd say, in that buyer's journey?
For sure. So the way I think about a website is that the website is almost a 24/7 marketing employee. So your website should be able to lead someone through a full buyer's journey on its own, right? Without intervention necessarily. There's certainly times where a salesperson can help push things forward and get someone over humps, but your website should function in that role as well. So it should do a good job of educating. It should be a good job of getting people to convert and take action. It should do a good job of addressing any common questions people have about your products and services, as well as addressing any pushbacks as well.
Very cool. Now, when you think about Flimp.net, right? Because a lot of marketers we have on the show, they always sort of there's always something to do or to improve or to change on the website. Like, where do you see sort of the biggest strength of the page versus where do you see room for further improvement?
Yeah, so the biggest strength is probably overall in our conversion. So we've seen our lead gen in the almost 2 years now that I've been here. We've seen our lead gen go from 30 to 50 leads a month to 175 to 200 leads a month. So pretty dramatic increase there. Mm-hmm. So like for us, it's kind of all focused on kind of conversion points, and that starts with understanding like what the entry points are. So if you understand what the entry points are across your website, then you can laser focus on those. So for example, I mentioned that 3 email templates to drive engagement article. Once we saw that starting to pop up in searches, we like went into that article and we said, how can we look at this article and reduce the steps to conversion, right? Because normally what happens is someone goes to an article, they see a CTA, they click that CTA, where they read the landing page, they look at the form, they decide they want to do the form, they fill out the form fills, hit submit. And that's there's a natural, even if everything you do is perfect, the perfect CTA, the perfect headline, perfect copy, perfect form, anything you do is perfect, there's always just a natural drop off anytime there's additional steps in that process, right? So one of the first things we try to do is how can we remove steps in that conversion path? So what we did on that article is try to add as many inline pieces as possible, content upgrades, similar types of content they can convert on without leaving that article in the first place.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was actually about to ask you on that particular one, because I see there's a lot of marketers that have maybe like, I don't know, 3 to 10 hero articles that are bringing all the traffic. Like, you already gave some very tangible advice there, like inline conversions. Is there anything else that you figured that makes a lot of sense to do on those articles?
Yeah, for sure. So inline conversion related articles, anytime you can keep people flowing through into similar content, it's going to just improve the likelihood that they convert, as well as that they get value from what you're offering. Mm-hmm. One thing that can be tricky when people do articles is like choosing the right type of content. What we do on our side is we kind of have 2 things. Since we focus on actionable content, what we typically do is you look for opportunities to create toolkits. So that 3 email templates, for example, is put out there as an organic SEO article, but it's also part of an overall toolkit. So it's one of 5 pieces in that overall toolkit. So it's a very natural conversion to say, hey, you're looking at this. This is part of a broader toolkit that has all these other things. Go and check that out.
Mm-hmm. Is there a particular article that people could check? And we go into the second point there. Is there a particular article that people could have a look at if they're interested in
So if someone just Googles email templates for open enroll, we should show up number 1 for that search term. Mm-hmm. Also pop that little link in the chat here for you. But that will show, a pretty clear example of that. The other technique that you can do is what's called the content upgrade technique. That's a formal term. You can Google that. You'll find tons of people talking about the content upgrade, but essentially looking at your content piece. What's like something small you can put together that's going to, upgrade that content. So for example, if they're looking at an article about how to create a good employee video, a pretty simple content upgrade is like a checklist, a checklist for the things to include in employee video, or like a quick tutorial.
Very cool. I mean, there's super tangible things in it, and I really, really enjoy that you're going down to that level of detail. I want to move on a little bit, right, and talk a little bit more about your journey as a marketer. Or is there any final remarks you wanted to do on the articles themselves, or you think that's the key? That's the key things.
I would say another piece of it as well, since as you're trying to grow your content and create those hero articles, one thing that we do a lot is a technique called the skyscraper technique. So we do kind of a similar technique. What we do is essentially when we're going after a particular topic or keyword, we do searches on those keywords and we find what's the best performing content. So in particular, what's the number one piece of content that tells that Google for this search term thinks this is the best representation for that search term. And then we look at it and say, how can we do something that's better and more valuable than that? And we trust that over time, if we do that, that's going to end up taking over that spot.
Gotcha. I mean, based on that, you were talking about content. Maybe one question that comes up a couple of times on the podcast is, if a team is trying to conquer a new topic, a new area of topic, maybe traditionally the organization has been very strong at a certain keyword and maybe a certain way of talking about the product, but maybe a new thing emerges or a new trend emerges. What would you say is like key things for them to do in order to actually starting to gain some authority on that sort of new set of keywords? What would you recommend them to do?
So the first thing I would recommend would be start from a higher level and find someone to interview on that topic, right? So that's maybe a customer that's looking for that type of service or has looked for that service. And what I want to do is interview those people and get a sense of not only like what is it they're looking for, but what are the sub questions, right? So if I go back to the example of employee videos, okay, so we have the broad topic of creating an employee video, but there's a lot of sub questions to that. How long should it be? What style should I use? Should it be animated or should it be people? How to include a CTA in one of these? How do I get people to take action off a video? So there's all these sub questions that go along with that. And if you start to understand those sub questions, those become a natural flow for you to start building authority on that topic, right? And this is reflected also in Google. A lot of Google search results now are very questions based, right? So not only are people searching questions, but usually when you type a question into Google, Google says, hey, here are 5 other related questions that people also ask about this. And that's also a great way to find those questions as well. So like if you're trying to build a new area, you need to build authority in that. And that starts to understand with what are the questions people have about that area, and then building specialized content for each of those.
Very cool. Now, as we're slowly sort of moving towards the end of the interview, I have some rapid fire questions to get to know you and your journey in marketing a little bit better. Are you ready for those?
Absolutely.
What is the last book you read or the last podcast you listened to?
Well, the last podcast I listened to was an episode of this podcast in preparations. But in terms of the last book I read, I like read a lot of articles and ebooks as part of my normal job function. So when I'm reading actual books, I typically do fiction. So I'm in a book club, and the last book we read was The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo.
What's one single thing that your company is focused on the most at the moment?
So growth, obviously, try to improve the website, but from, my job going forward, I mentioned at the start of the interview, the idea of like people are looking to learn something, do something, or be inspired. The be inspired is a pretty huge gap for us, just because it's kind of complicated to, pull examples. You might have to reach out to companies, interview them. It's kind of a complicated process. So the next kind of role for me is to try and build out that kind of clear gap in our content system.
If there would be no boundaries in technology, what would be the one thing that you would want to fix for your role as a marketer today?
An AI RevOps person would be ideal. that can
Mhm.
handle all the go between marketing and sales, make it clear like where leads originate from and where they go without, user input on the sales or marketing side to track all that activity.
And for the very last question, if you would allow, I would like to do a little bit of time travel. Let's go to Babson College, if you allow. We go back to the days. You're heading out of formal education into the world of, marketing, growth, social media. What's the one advice you would give yourself for your journey?
Yeah, I would say, be curious. One thing that Babson always focus on. Babson is a very entrepreneurial focused organization. They're number one entrepreneurship. They have been for about 25 years now. And one thing that they preach is also a term called entrepreneurship. It's like being entrepreneurial within an organization. So looking for new ways to do things, looking for new products with that organization. And that comes down to like curiosity. If you're always like curious and looking to try new things and not scared of going into new areas, that's going to help you immensely.
Very cool. Ross, I really appreciate you took the time with us today to be a guest on Pathmark Presents. I want to give you the very last word. If somebody would be forgetting all that we discussed about Flimp today, what's the one thing that people should remember?
Yep. If you want your employees to use and love their benefits without doing a lot of heavy lifting on your own, Flimp is the place to go.
Thanks a lot for being a guest on Pathmark Presents.
Thanks very much for having me.